It's a great day for another episode of Point of View. I'm Pastor Josh Barnes, and this is the show where we look at political, social, cultural, and theological issues from a biblical point of view, worldview. And the reason is because, everybody's going to arrive at different conclusions. But how do you know you're right? Are you right because you feel like it? You're right because your heart tells you you're right? Or are you right because you have a foundation? You have some sort of truth that you can rely on. Well, Jesus died on the cross and he rose from the dead. And he said the Bible was true. And if Jesus is really rose from the dead, then it's really good reason to believe that he knows what he's talking about. And when he says the Bible is true, it is. And if the Bible is true, then we can't be right about issues if we're in disagreement with the Bible. So it's important that we look through the lens of the Bible at issues if Jesus really rose from the dead, because then the Bible really is true. And we're wrong about issues if we don't start with checking to make sure wherever we stand on the thing is biblical. So what we talked about last time, this is kind of part two, we talked about last time is this statue that is now sitting outside of the UN building. And that is a statue of a leopard with wings like an eagle. And a lot of people have said, well, oh, look, this is the beast from Revelation. So we talked about last episode that this is not the beast from Revelation. This is very different actually from the beast of Revelation. Now maybe the sculptor was going for a beast from Revelation vibe, and I suppose it kind of has the same vibe. But the beast from Revelation actually is not a leopard eagle. It is a leopard lion bear. It has the feet of a bear. There you see it on the screen. It has the feet of a bear. It has the heads of lions or the mouths of lions, and it has the body of a leopard. And it has 7 heads and 10 horns. So that's very different than the beast that we see in front of the UN, which is just a leopard with eagle's wings, right? The image in Revelation doesn't even have wings. Now there is another leopard that has wings in Daniel chapter 7. We talked about that last week. And Daniel chapter 7, by the way, not last week, yesterday. Go ahead and, if you're on YouTube, you can go to YouTube, see all of our episodes. If you haven't watched that one, go check it out now because I think that'll help you, give you some backstory for what we're going to talk about today. But so, yes, there was a beast in Daniel that had the body of a leopard with wings, but it was not said to be wings like an eagle. It had 4 wings, and it also had 4 heads, and this actually was a very clearly a picture of the Greek Empire. So it's not even a future thing; it's a thing that is already past. So the fact that this UN statue has wings like an eagle isn't really necessarily line up with prophetic things. It is weird to see a leopard with eagle's wings, but it doesn't really fit the prophecy very closely at all. So maybe they were going for that. I don't know. But the question we got into, though, we talked about the beast. We talked about how Daniel talks about these 7 years that are still left to be accomplished in biblical prophecy. Now, some people will try to argue that it's already been accomplished after Jesus died. There are so many places in which that theory actually fails. So many inconsistencies if you're going to take that view, in my opinion, and I think I can demonstrate that I think that's kind of silly. And most people do believe that this is actually, there are 7 years left. So when you talk about prophetic events and the world ending and the apocalypse, all of this is stuff that is said to be taking place at some future event over like a 7-year period, because this is what Daniel said. And what Daniel said, we talked about this a little yesterday. What Daniel said about that period of time is that somewhere right in the middle, in that 3rd year of the 7 years, in the 4th year, so after 3 years, somewhere in that 4th year, in the middle year of those 7 years, there's going to be this abomination that this one guy sort of comes to power. He's controlling a sort of reforged Roman Empire type of a thing, and that in the center of that period of time, he commits this abomination of desolation. Like he does this terrible evil thing in the temple of God, and and then he starts persecuting believers and going after Christians and killing them. Now, some people will say this already happened. This happened in 70 AD. And I say, no, that's actually nonsense, because the Christians were being persecuted before 70 AD, and they were also being persecuted afterward. There was no really difference between the two. 70 AD is when Jerusalem was destroyed, not the Christians. It wasn't really about Christians so much as it was about Jerusalem and the Jews. So that's different. But so people say, well, what's left? Are we seeing the mark of the beast now? What kind of things are we seeing now? Okay, let me explain what happens in Revelation 13, because Revelation 13 kind of gives you all the information about the mark of the beast. But before that, let me show you what we find in the New Testament about this abomination of desolation. I'm going to go to the book of Matthew, Matthew chapter 24. Talks about this. It says, when ye shall see, verse 15, the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place. Whoso readeth, let him understand. Then let them be which be in Judea flee into the mountains. So Jesus is talking here, and he says, first of all, the abomination of desolation hasn't taken place yet. But when you see it, it's going to stand in the holy place. Now, the Jews already kind of knew what this was going to be like, because a couple hundred years before Jesus showed up, there was a man, Antiochus Epiphanes, Antiochus, however you want to pronounce it. And he was a Greek guy. He came in, he actually set up a temple to Zeus, a shrine to Zeus in the temple, an idol in the temple. He caused people, he offered pig's blood in the temple. He forced people to eat swine's flesh in the temple. He defiled the temple. And people thought that, oh, this is the abomination. But Jesus, when he was here, he said, no, when you see it, it's in the future. So that was actually just a picture of what will happen in the future, that Greek king Antiochus Epiphanes. The actual fulfillment of this abomination of desolation hasn't happened yet, according to Jesus. Okay, so it's something that's going to be set up in the temple, and it says, Jesus even said after that, verse 21, for then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time. So there's going to be worse persecution of believers in Christ at that time than there ever has been ever in the world. And that's saying something, because there's been some intense persecution of Christians throughout the world. Okay, I'm going to give you a little timeline here, but first let's go to 2 Thessalonians. So 2 Thessalonians talks again about this thing that's going to happen in the temple. And it says here that Paul is writing to the Thessalonians, who are a little worried that maybe they're already in this last 7 years and maybe they're being persecuted like this. And because they are dealing with persecution by the Roman Emperor Nero. And Paul actually writes to the Thessalonians and calms them down and says, hang on, you remember the things that I told you. Verse 5, remember ye not that when I was with you I told you these things, and now you know what withholdeth, that he might be revealed in his time. For the mystery of iniquity doth already work. He's giving you kind of a little bit mysterious language. But it says that once God is going to do something, and once God does this and starts this 7 weeks, verse 8, and then shall that wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. So hang on, there's something that has to happen before the wicked guy is going to be revealed, and that wicked guy is going to be destroyed by the brightness of the coming of the Lord. And so this is the end time stuff, okay? What is it that this wicked guy is going to do? It says that verse 9, even him whose coming is after the working of Satan with all powers and signs and lying wonders and all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they receive not the love of the truth. So he's saying, listen, they're going to come. This evil person is going to be actually filled by Satan. And in verse 4, it actually gives more clarity on exactly what he's going to do. Who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. So Here's what we got. We got in the future 7 years. Okay? 7 years in the future, there's going to be some sort of a peace between some sort of revived empire of the world, between that empire and Israel. There's going to be 7 years of peace promised. Then there's going to be about 3.5 years. Now, Daniel actually seems to give us a date 65 days before the exact 3.5 year mark. But 65 days before the 3.5 year mark, there's going to be this abomination of desolation in that fourth year. Then after that, there's going to be, a lot of other things that are said in Revelation. There's these two witnesses that are on the earth, these, that are working miracles, and they're killed. That's right at the 3.5 year mark. And then 1,335 days after the abomination of desolation, Jesus comes back, and that's when he returns at the end of the 7 years. So basically, what Revelation 13 is saying is that in the middle of this period of time, here's what the abomination of desolation will look like. And this is where the mark of the beast comes in. So this is important. I know we're getting a little bit into the weeds, but I'm hoping that this sort of answers a lot of questions for people who are like, wait, what is this mark of the beast thing? People who are afraid that the vaccine is the mark of the beast just don't understand all of the teaching and all of the theology and eschatology, which is the study of end times things, that it is done here on the book of Revelation. And there are a lot of different views, but none of them allow for the mark of the beast to be a vaccine. Okay, but let me just walk you through where the mark of the beast comes in. So we've got the setting. I've given you a lot of information. Let's put this all together. Okay. Daniel tells us in Daniel chapter 7 that this evil guy is coming in the future, and he's going to persecute the saints for 3.5 years. Then in Daniel chapter 9, we're told that this same guy is going to make a 7-year peace treaty with Israel, and then halfway through it, he's going to break the peace treaty, or I don't know whether he breaks the peace treaty is important. He's going to go into the temple. He's going to desecrate the temple by doing some terrible thing. Jesus says that this thing still hasn't happened yet at Jesus' time, and that it is, and that afterward there's going to be this great persecution of believers. So again, Daniel said for 3.5 years, so this guy's going to persecute believers, and that he's going to do it in the middle of a 7-year period of peace. Jesus said that after the abomination of desolation, in the middle of that 7 years, there's going to be this great persecution of believers. You see how it all comes together? Then in Thessalonians, we find out what this abomination is. This guy's going to actually come. He's going to sit down in the temple of God, and he's going to declare, hey, I'm God, right? And this is, of course, is going to desecrate the temple. He's going to make everyone worship him in the temple, okay? So when this happens, he declares himself to be God, and this becomes really important. Now he's got to make sure, because he's sort of running the world empire at the time, that everyone actually worships him. And this is why he institutes the mark of the beast. It's so that people can prove that they worship the head dude. We call him the Antichrist, right? Let me read you Revelation 13 now that you kind of have that framework, okay? It says this, "And I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads and the name of blasphemy." Blasphemy meaning you're speaking against God. Of course, the greatest blasphemy is to declare yourself to be God, unless you truly are God, like Jesus. Verse 2, "And the beast which I saw was like a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him power, and his seat and great authority." Now, we've already read in Revelation, if you read through in order, that the dragon is Satan. And that is, again, repeated in other places in the book of Revelation. So the dragon here, Satan is giving the power to this guy. We call him the Antichrist. And I think that's a good name for him. It's found in 1 John. So this guy is getting his power from Satan, verse 3, "And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and the deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast." Now, this a lot of people have debated about. Does this mean this is what we mean when we say that the Roman Empire died mostly, but it's kind of still around in that Rome still exists and there's still a nation of Italy and all those sort of things. And, Rome sort of morphed into a religious empire under the Catholic Church, and maybe that will be revived back into a political empire one day. We don't know. We don't know. But maybe that's what it's talking about when it says that one of his heads was wounded unto death. And then his deadly wound was healed. Like, that's the healing of the Roman Empire. We don't know what exactly. It's important when you read prophecy that you kind of say, oh, that could be it, and I don't know for sure, right? But there are some things when you see it all lining up that makes a lot of sense, and you can kind of say, that looks like that's how it's going to happen. Verse 4, so after this abomination of desolation, verse 4, and they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast being the Antichrist, saying, who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and them that dwell in heaven. 42 months, you do the math, that is 3.5 years. So Daniel talks about this guy showing up for 7 years, and in the middle of that, for 3.5 years, he commits an abomination, and he persecutes believers for 3.5 years. Jesus says the same thing after the abomination. There's going to be persecution of believers, and Paul reaffirms that the abomination is going to be him claiming to be God. Revelation 13, we see, okay, here's this guy. He shows up. He demands to be worshipped, and he's going to continue commanding to be worshipped as God for 42 months, 3.5 years. Okay, so this is all fitting together. This is clearly meant to parallel each other. Verse 7, and it was given unto him to make war with the saints. Same thing we already read, and to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations, and all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb, slain from the foundation of the world. If any man have an ear, let him hear. He that he leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity, and so on and so forth. Verse 11, and I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and spoke as a dragon. And he exercised all the power of the first beast before him, and caused the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. So this is interesting. This guy comes on the scene after the Antichrist figure goes into the temple, claims to be God, and demands everyone to worship him, and starts persecuting anyone who won't worship him, the believers in Jesus Christ. And then this guy comes on the scene, and he says it's another beast. It's kind of like the first one. He has kind of the same power, but he's a little different. He's got 2 horns, and he's a lamb. Now, that probably means it's a religious figure. The lamb being pictured as like the spotless lamb of sacrifice. It sounds like it's a religious figure. What the 2 horns mean, I don't know. I guess we'll know when we see it. But it says that he causes the earth and them that dwell therein to worship the first beast. So his whole job is to say, hey, look, this is God. He's right. Verse 13, he doeth great wonders. So he's doing like miraculous demonic miracles to get people to worship the Antichrist. Okay, and that deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast, and that which had the wound by a sword and did live, and he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, and the image of the beast should both speak, and cause that as many would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. So one of the miracles he does is make this idol of the beast speak to people, and so people are like, oh my goodness, wow, this is real. He really is God. It's speaking to me, and so that's one of the miracles he does. Anyway, verse 16, and he caused all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, that no man might buy or sell, save he that hath the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here's wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 600, 60, which is 60, and 6. Okay, so what we just read is maybe it's in the weeds for you. Let me break it down. Very simple. Basically, when this Antichrist guy comes and does this abomination halfway through a 7-year peace treaty, He starts to persecute all believers who are on the earth. And someone else comes on the scene and starts saying, hey, look, this guy is God. Believe in him. And he starts working demonic miracles to prove that the Antichrist is God. And then he develops this system of marking people who acknowledge and worship the Antichrist as their God. So that way they can find out who isn't worshiping the Antichrist and go after them and kill them. Okay, that's how they war against the saints. So this is what the mark of the beast is. The mark of the beast is you saying, I'm worshiping the beast, therefore give me this mark so that you don't kill me. And everyone without the mark, you're going to go after, they can't buy or sell anything because they're going to go after them, persecute them, kill them if they can. Okay, so this is why when people start talking about the mark of the beast being the vaccine or whatever, I always kind of scratch my head at that because that's kind of nonsense. The mark that you can't accidentally take the mark of the beast. That would defeat the whole purpose. The mark of the beast is meant to prove loyalty to the beast. If you can take the mark of the beast without being loyal to the beast, it would defeat the whole mark, right? Now the mark, we'll talk a little bit about what the mark might be, maybe a little bit later. But the point here is that the mark of the beast has to be something you knowingly do on purpose, or else it wouldn't work. All right. So again, let me show you this. Let me show you this scheme here. So when we're talking about the mark of the beast, we're talking about a time period after a 7-year peace treaty is promised with Israel. Halfway through that peace treaty, according to Daniel, then you have this Antichrist figure committing an abomination in the temple, and then he claims himself to be God. And in order to prove that you worship him as God, you have to get this mark of the beast, right? So you can't accidentally take the mark of the beast. That's the whole point. If you could get the mark of the beast without worshiping the beast, then it would defeat the whole purpose. The whole point is to prove that you actually worship the beast, so that the beast knows that you're not a Christian, right? So don't worry about, hey, getting a social security number or something like that. You're accidentally going to be taking the mark of the beast. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the mark of the beast. Okay. Now let's talk about what the mark of the beast could be, right? Because people say, well, it's a microchip, it's a computer chip, it's a tracking device. I don't think so. Or at least that's not what we're told in Scripture. Maybe it could include those things, but that's not the point of what we're told in Scripture. So you're adding that to Scripture, not actually getting that from the Bible. Look what it says here. It says in verse 16, and he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads. So first of all, if it's a microchip, it's not something that's only for people who can afford it, right? This is going to be free. It's going to be free as long as you've worshipped the beast. As long as you've worshipped the Antichrist who's claiming to be God, it's free, right? Poor, rich, whatever. And the mark it's optional. They can either take it in their forehead or in their right hand. Now that's interesting. I don't know what exactly the significance, but it just, it's a fashion statement. You can either have it up here where you're really displaying it, or in your hand. One way or the other. It's got to be in one of those two. Verse 17, and that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Okay, so here's the three things that you can have. And there's two places where you can have it. You can either have it in your hand or in your forehead, and it's either the name of the beast or the Antichrist, whatever his name is, or it's a mark that symbolizes the beast, or it's a number, right? The number is not the mark. You either get a mark that's sort of some sort of symbol of the Antichrist, maybe it's like a seal or something like that, or you get just his name written, or you get a number that's associated with his name. Now, that number is 666. Now, the significance of the number 666 is really not important. The point is that the only thing the mark does is the mark is visible, right? It's not an invisible thing, because otherwise, how would you have the name or a number or a mark. A mark means something you can see. So the point is that this is all a visible thing. And now, could there also be a microchip that goes with it? Yes, but you're not going to accidentally, invisibly have the mark of the beast. The mark of the beast is something that's going to be seen on your skin. People can look at you and identify and say, boom, you are a worshiper of the Antichrist, and look at someone who's not and say, boom, you're a Christian, kill him. Okay? So this is what's in the future for us. I mean, this is the future of the world. Now, it's only for 7 years. Jesus comes back, everything's going to be okay in the end. So don't sweat it. I mean, but it's going to get really bad for a little while. And here's the thing. You really misunderstand prophecy when you start talking about it like it's happening now. Because this is nothing like how bad it will be in prophecy. Now, truly, we are seeing in America this trend toward controlling people, toward a one world government. We see a trend towards being able to force people, you can't buy or sell unless you take a vaccine. You can't buy or sell unless you do X, Y, Z. It is true that right now in America, we're seeing this trend towards being able to control people in that way, right? But we are not seeing anything nearly as bad as what's going to be in the end times. But the next question people always ask me is, okay, but are we seeing the precursors to that? Yes, I think we are, but I think we've been seeing the precursors for this for a long time. In the first century, and even into the second century AD, with the very first Christians, were persecuted by several different Roman emperors, and Nero is one of them, Trajan's another one, and these emperors would force you to acknowledge that they are the Lord, they're in charge, they are God. They would force you to worship them, and if you didn't worship them, you were not given papers that showed that you worshiped them, and you would not be allowed to buy or sell in certain areas. So this is the type of thing that Christians have dealt with before. So it's what we're not seeing in our time is something new. This move towards controlling people and trying to get them in a place where they're ready for the mark of the beast is not new. It's been going on for thousands of years. And so don't freak out about this stuff. It is serious. It is a big deal, but it's not over yet. The battle's not over. Jesus is going to win in the end. So don't go too crazy about all the prophetic stuff. It's a lot more complicated than you might think, but it's also a lot simpler, and it's nothing to worry about because Jesus wins. That's all the time I got. We'll see you next time on Point of View.